All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Laura.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarjanya. Laura and I will be hosting today's EMRA Hangout session. Thank you so much for being here today. We're both on the EMRA Medical Student Advising team. So welcome to our monthly webinar series where we're discussing current topics related to advising students interested in emergency medicine. Today, we're joined by Dr. Jeff Comp, Dr. Fiona Gallahue, and Dr. Brian Millman. We'll be talking about how to rock your EM interviews this match season. And here's a little bit about all of our speakers. So Dr. Comp completed medical school at KCU Com in Kansas City and emergency medicine residency at Doctors Hospital in Columbus, Ohio, before he returned back home to Arizona. He's currently an associate program director for the Creighton University School of Medicine Emergency Medicine Residency Program at the Valleywise Health Medical Center in Phoenix, Arizona, formerly the Maricopa Medical Center. Dr. Comp participates as a leader, mentor, and advocate for wilderness medicine and EM medical education at various levels of education and training. His professional and research focus includes wilderness medicine, physician wellness, mentorship, as well as innovation in medical education. He's constantly seeking out opportunities to combine his interests through collaboration and personal outdoor exploration. Dr. Comp, want to give us a wave? There we go.
Hi, guys. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Next, we have Dr. Fiona Gallahue. She's the founder and program director of the Emergency Medicine Residency at the University of Washington and associate professor at the UW in the Department of Emergency Medicine. Dr. Gallahue is a graduate of Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis. She completed her residency and chief residency in emergency medicine at New York University Bellevue Medical Center in 2001. She was the president of the Council of Residency Directors in Emergency Medicine, CORD-EM, from 2020 to 2021. Dr. Gallahue's research interests include opportunities to improve graduate medical education, gender bias in resident evaluations, and engagement of residents in the clinical learning environment. When not working, Dr. Gallahue's favorite pursuits are gardening, baking sourdough bread, and spending time with her husband and 2 teenage daughters. Hi, Dr. Gallahue. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Next, we have Dr. Brian Millman. He's an assistant professor and the associate program director at the University of Oklahoma Department of Emergency Medicine in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He completed emergency medicine residency in Tulsa in 2019 and stayed on with the department as faculty. He works clinically in 3 high-volume, high-acuity emergency departments in the Tulsa and Oklahoma City areas. Dr. Millman is passionate about teaching, advising, and mentoring. When he's not working, he spends most of his free time in the kitchen cooking. Thank you for being here, Dr. Millman.
It's great to be here, y'all.
All right, so again, thank you so much for Dr. Comp, Gallahue, and Millman for joining us today and giving us their time. And we'll get started here with some questions that students have submitted previously. If you guys have, if students have any other questions that we haven't covered, you can include them in the chat, and if time permits, we'll try to get to them at the end of our conversation here. So we'll start off with some questions regarding pre-interview preparation. So for whoever would like to start, our first question, what are some recommendations on how to research a program prior to interview? What do you look for?
So I would say that if you're going to interview at a place, like please look at their website just a little bit, right? You know, if you're going to talk about sort of one of the sort of frustrating things is if somebody asks a question where you're like, well, we just talked for an hour about the whole thing, all of our programs, and either you weren't listening in there and you didn't look at our website. So like, just, you know, read the information that the program makes available because we put a lot of time into those resources because we want you to know about who we are and what we are. And then what we want to do is like actually talk to you and get to know you and have like dig into all the other little details that you're curious about.
And really use social media, right? A lot of programs are really starting to get really involved in Twitter, even Snapchat, Instagram, like a bunch of different platforms to share some of the things that their residents are doing, or even like teaching pearls, right? And that's the kind of stuff that will give you a little bit of a feel for the thing that everyone sort of talks about in this season is the culture of a program, right? With the website, absolutely, I couldn't agree more. You need to sort of know that kind of stuff, like what are the nuts and bolts? How many blocks of emergency medicine do you do each month or each year? What are some of the kind of requirements, et cetera, et cetera. But then really following along as the year progresses and as the months progress along with social media, that's really how you're going to start to get a feel of who the people are at the program you're looking at.
I want to make a little plug for social media also. Some of the things that you can see are pictures of slide sets from conference. And so you can see what the actual quality and topics of conference lectures are. You can, realistically, you're not going to make it to 90% of the cities that you're interviewing in. So a lot of social media from these programs will show you restaurants in the cities or how much time the residents are spending together outside the hospital. So there's a ton of information available on program-run social media accounts. The other thing that I want to mention is on the EMRA website, there are program director video interviews, and these contain a ton of information and a lot of things that you can't get just from the website. Some of the reasons to watch these also, and they're a little bit on the longer side, so you have to be slightly more selective with how many you watch or what programs videos you watch. But it's the program director answering questions, so you can see what the program director or assistant program director or residents are passionate about and bring that to your interviews or see if your goals really align with that program's leadership.
Perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, one other thing, just to talk about, just to agree with Dr. Millman, also look at the region that you're applying to, right? If there isn't something about, what are the things that you enjoy doing, and will this location that you're going to, does that match with it, right? Look for that kind of stuff. If it's on social media, it's great. If not, just say, like for me, look up Phoenix, Arizona and say, hey, it's going to be hot, but would I enjoy being out there? Same with all the other cities that we have programs at and everywhere else that you're going to be applying.
And we have more than just skiing in Seattle.
We have more than just rattlesnakes in Phoenix. not a lot more, but we do have more than just rattlesnakes in Arizona.
We just have rattlesnakes in Tulsa.
You just have, all right, cool. All right.
Okay, so I guess get ready for your rattlesnake antidotes if you're applying for those programs. So, Dr. Gallagher, did you have anything to add?
No, I'm just like, I'm thinking about rattlesnakes and I'm a little scared, man. Like, sorry.
All right, great. So next question, what is the format of EM interviews? I believe they're asking about virtual versus in-person interviews and if there's a statement been made and everything.
So having just rotated off of CORD board, but at least being aware of sort of what CORD has said, because CORD is the Council of Residency Directors in Emergency Medicine. And so CORD really does speak for the programs and sort of best practices. There has been a recommendation for virtual interviews by CORD, with the understanding that there may be programs for which that doesn't work well, and also have put out a call to sort of allow for resident candidates to go and actually potentially go and look at places without being pinged if they didn't go to look. And that's really for a couple of reasons. One, everybody knows how much in debt residents are. And, medical debt's a really, like that debt is a big deal, right? It impacts you on a significant level. And so, CORD's really concerned, to be honest, about sort of, student debt loads of our folks. So that's one of the reasons why virtual interviews is really being touted. And then the second thing is climate change. Emergency medicine, we take care of vulnerable patients. That's what we do. We are the stopgap for the incredibly broken system that's in front of us. And so climate change affects the most vulnerable people out there. And so we want to advocate for not furthering climate change by sending lots of people across the country for 12 interviews as much as possible. So those were the things that CORD came out, but also kind of used a language that allowed for some places to basically have in-person interviews. So I would say that by and large, most of the programs are probably being virtual, and then there's some places that are going to be having in-person interviews because they feel that that's the best ways to showcase their program and for people to really see their programs. But I think philosophically, you should definitely, you know, it's important to know that there's a philosophy behind having virtual versus in person. And that's actually like, you know, you're making a statement one way or the other by how you do it. And I think every program director has thought about it deeply and how they can best showcase their program and make sure that the fit is the right one, because you're also making a really important decision. You know, the programs you choose to rank highly are the programs you will likely be at. And so this is probably one of the most important decisions you can make, where you train and how you train. This is one of the most transformative experiences you can have, being in training to be a doctor. Your professional identity is forged in training. So, sorry, that's pretty heavy to basically say, well, most will probably be virtual with some in person. But I do think that it is it's a bigger, deeper topic, and most program directors have really thought pretty deeply about why.
And when
we
you
were
offered
so-
interviews,
We
sorry,
were
but
so
when you
worried
offered
about
interviews,
this
you will probably
initially.
find out. Dr. Millen, go ahead. This is awesome.
I'm sorry, Jeff. We were so worried about this initially from the program side and from the applicant side that we wouldn't be able to really figure out who you were or know you as an applicant doing this all virtually. And what we found out from the last couple interview seasons is that's not true at all. You are a person, even though it's through a screen. And we can figure out exactly how well you'll fit with our program, and you can get a good taste of our program and our residents, even though we can't sit down for a drink together. Sorry, Dr. Comp.
No, absolutely not. That's the beauty of Zoom, right? Is the constant over chatter. So yes, absolutely. Well, most programs are. There may be a couple that are. Most programs are going to be virtual. There may be a couple that are doing live and in person, and that kind of information will be relayed to you by the program after you get extended some sort of interview. There will be scheduling. There'll be a lot of different ways for them to sort of like let you know the best way or the way that they are selecting to be able to get to know you a little bit more.
I think we can talk about the structure of interview day as far as what the day actually looks like a little bit also, because this is certainly a virtual versus in-person question, but I'm also reading it a little bit as what is interview day actually going to be like. And it will take every form. There's a huge range of what interview days are going to look like, but for the most part, you're going to meet the program director or get some presentation about what really stands out about that program. You're going to have an opportunity to meet some residents. You'll have one-on-one or possibly two-on-one or panel interviews. At my program, it's all one-on-one interviews, but there are a lot of variations of that as well. And then there will be some form of virtual tour as well.
And that may also not be on the same day. So like for us, the night before, we have like a virtual mixer where we'll have everyone that's applying and interviewing that next morning. We'll all meet up on Zoom. We'll have a bit, I say we, actually faculty that doesn't attend. It's only residents. So you're able to ask some of the nitty gritty questions to some of the residents that you may not really want to ask the faculty, but we give you that opportunity and that option to be able to say, hey, here's a little bit about us. Here are the things that we enjoy doing. Some time to ask some questions, some smaller breakout sessions, and the next day we do the exact same thing, right? So that very same, like similar format where our program director talks, and then we break out into our smaller little Zoom rooms for the interviews.
Perfect. And just really quickly, I was wondering, can you address if there's a consensus on like second looks or if it's pretty program specific?
I think it's probably somewhat program specific, and it really depends on what your GME folks have said. Like, you know, we're hoping that we'll be allowed to do a second look for people after we've submitted our rank list, so that, you know, basically like people can choose to do what they do or don't want to do. But for the person who basically is like, I really think I'm interested in your program, but I really can't until I actually go and actually see people in human, you know, in human form, I don't feel comfortable, that the opportunity would be there for somebody to do a second look. But I would want that to only happen like after we've already submitted our rank list, so that people know it's for them, not for us. And I really want to make sure that we actually advocate for folks who don't have money, who don't have resources. I don't want to contribute to debt, and I don't want to feel anybody coerced to come out to Seattle in January just because they feel like that would otherwise disadvantage them. So I think there's a couple of equity issues in that. But it also depends on what your DIO has said. Currently, our current our current stance with our DIO is no second looks at all. Everything has to be fully virtual. I suspect that's going to be walked back quite a bit, but it's hard to know, at least at our own institution, and there's other institutions who've been equally conservative.
Do not feel obligated to do a second look anywhere. Only do it for yourself.
Yes, exact same thing, right? If it's an opportunity that you would like to take to be able to look and learn more about the program, that's fantastic. And that's frankly what they should be designed to do.
Thank you. Kind of related to this, any specific interview preparation resources you recommend for getting ready for EM interviews?
So we were just talking about some of the resources that are being made available some places, and apparently there's some websites that are like bright and shiny websites of like, here, take all this like resources to like learn how to do your interviews, which is, there's a lot of words I could use for it, but I think it's a lot of money for not a lot of benefit, to be honest. I mean, I don't think you guys realize how much we want to just get to know you. I mean, if you have some really strange verbal tics where you honestly can't say a word until like you've gotten through 5 ums, it's probably worthwhile to talk to a friend and go back and forth and have a conversation without doing something like that. But for the most part, I worry about some of these like resources that are being thrown out there, to be honest. There is such a thing as being overly polished, and there is such a thing as basically like, we just want to get to know who you are. And I worry that some of that stuff is sort of losing that realness. So I would say, like, you can go online and you can basically find a bunch of questions out there, which is fine. But what I would really do is I would craft your narrative. Are there 3 or 4 stories that you can come up with that really say who you are? Like, who you are, what your narrative is, what makes you you. So, talk about a time that you had a conflict and how did that, resolve, and what were you really proud about that you were able to do, that you found courage to do the right thing. What about a time that you really persevered, that you thought about something, you got through something really hard and you made it through and you weren't sure you were going to, get through? I mean, I can't tell you how many people, like, I was more of an artist doing all this photography stuff when I decided to go, post-grad pre-med, and people were like, you can't be a doctor. And I was like, okay. I mean, that was my answer to everybody. I was like, okay, sure. Probably not, because I don't have any doctors in my family. What do I know? And it wasn't worth getting into a fight with people, right? But you just keep going through it and you're like, well, if I fail, I fail, and I'm just going to do my very best. And then you do okay. And you're like, oh, I did well. You can craft narratives like that of who are you? Who are you? And just find a few stories to tell, like, who you are and what does that mean about you? What does that say about you? What are you passionate about? Talk about that. Come up with a few narratives that craft your narrative to say who you are. And then, those are going to answer most of the questions you're going to get asked. Who are you in conflict? Who are you when you're tired? Who are you when somebody tells you can't do that? Right?
I think that's the best advice, right? Especially the advice that says you can be too polished. If you go through and you copy and paste all of the regular questions that you can find on a lot of websites and then type out an answer and then try to remember those verbatim, it's going to seem less genuine. So I love the idea of saying, hey, I want to have a couple of like themes for my answer, right? So think about a couple of examples that you can use to really hit home a point of, hey, I'm a really caring person and here's why. And I love some of the examples that Dr. Gallahue just gave up of like, hey, what were some times that you really faced adversity? What was the time that you had to kind of dust yourself off and pick yourself back up? And what did that look like to you? Because you can, once you've had those sort of like in the back of your head, that will really allow you to shine in some of the other specific questions. I think if you want to do something to prepare, I love the idea of just asking a friend to watch you and just to ask some questions to be able to say, hey, it looks like you click a pen or you tap or you bounce your knee or you say, or you have some other kind of verbal tic that you use to fill in space. That's helpful, but it's also something that you don't need to be totally like hammering home on. We want to know who you are. And if you are a person that is excited to meet us and excited to interview with us, then that's who I want to know. I don't really want another person that can regurgitate an answer that they spent hours trying to perfect in a Word document.
So I'm a little bit in between. I personally need something a little bit more concrete. And so I would never recommend typing out answers to all the questions you can find and keeping them on the side of your screen and giving a rehearsed answer or reading off something on the side of your screen. That's absolutely not what we want. But in order for me to kind of, if I were preparing for an interview, in order for me to craft some of these narratives, I would need some prompts. And so you could go to a question list and kind of find some of the questions that we're going to ask to help you shape some of the narratives, and be a little bit broad with it, think through it, but maybe have some bullet points and not something written out. I went to the EMRA website today and typed in interview, and I got 415 results, and almost all of them were incredible. So there is, if you do need a concrete resource, there is a lot of good information on the EMRA website, and some of them are question lists, some of them are how to prepare for interviews. There is definitely a wealth of resources there. You can pick a few of those. Do not spend all of your time reading through the EMRA website interview preparation materials, but you can pick a few of those to give you a little bit more of a concrete interview prep if you need it. Some people don't need that at all.
So Megan had a good question here.
That's
about,
an excellent
like,
question.
right? I'm like, I will say that, when you craft your own narrative, those are the stories you usually don't get tired of telling. That would be my sort of advice, is like, and that you're going to change some details or things like that. Cause you're right. Like, if I'm going to say the same damn, like, 4 stories every minute, every day, how do I make sure it doesn't sound overly polished or overly rehearsed? But you may shift it slightly based on the question that gets asked. And also, hopefully it's something that actually, like, taps something deep in you. Cause you know what, like, I'll tell you, the question I never get tired of is, what are you really proud of your program, right? Because it taps something really deep. It's like, and to be honest, like, there's so many different things that I'm so proud of, to be honest, that, like, I can definitely, like, add something here and there, or change it up, because there's a lot of things I'm proud of. So I think that's where I would sort of just say, it's not going to be exactly the same, but if it taps something deep, it's your story. Be confident in that story, and add a little something here, add a little something there. You're not really telling the same story. What you really are is saying who you are. And I think that's what I want to just sort of, like, say, is that you want it to be something real, and you always feel real. Like, the story always comes through as real when it's something really important to you.
And also thinking about what, like, the reason that you're telling the story, right? So yeah, maybe telling the exact same events of what happened might get kind of around the same, but the reason that you're using that specific example is because you're really wanting to lean into the question that you're getting asked, right? So you're using that to really illustrate, this is why I want to be an emergency medicine physician. This was a time where I really triumphed over adversity, and using the story to sort of hammer home your point. That will be a little bit different every time.
Thank you.
That's a great question, though, because I definitely, even with myself, as we're coming into, like, the January and I'm, like, on my last couple ones, I run out of steam. So it's an extraordinary question.
Okay,
To answer that additional question in the chat, there's not going to be any way to completely avoid repetition from your application. You all poured your entire lives into your ERAS application, and restating things in your personal statement or your application are completely fine.
I agree. I think that's the thing that you can do that doesn't always come through on your CV or personal statement is either the lesson you learned or the way that you grew as a person and a future physician. That's the thing that you can really, really exemplify. I mean, I love seeing things like, oh, I was a waiter, or I was a coach, or I was in the military, or something else. And then you're able to say, yeah, so that's what I did, but here's what I learned from it. And that like, here's what I learned from it. That's how you can really optimize what you put down in your CV.
Couldn't agree more.
Anything else to add, Dr. Millman, Gallagher? No, okay. Our next question is regarding how to handle questions if you struggle with bragging about yourself, which I think you kind of covered with getting a few narratives together and kind of going deeply into what you're passionate about. Anything else like you'd like to add for students who might have trouble with that?
I would hope that you're proud of who you are and what you've accomplished. Like all of you have done some great things in your lives. And so I don't think that, there's a big, I don't know. I mean, maybe as a female, it's always a bit challenging personally to sort of like, uh, I mean, I certainly have challenges sometimes, like sort of talking about my accomplishments, and I certainly like couch a lot of things in a sort of traditionally humble way. But you also want people to know what you've done, and I think you're advocating not just for yourself, but also for like the people that have done things with you, right? It's never wrong to basically say like, I did this thing and I did this thing with this group of people who were really flippin' amazing. And I'm really proud of what I did, because not only am I proud of what I did, but I'm really proud of the teamwork that happened here, right? Like it's much easier for me to actually get up there and brag about my team. Like every day of it, like I'm just so proud of my team. And like I think that that's one way. Now sometimes you do a lot of individual things, and there is a fine line between sort of, but again, when you've done something cool and amazing or interesting or passionate about, like it comes through as something you're really passionate about. And why are you passionate about it? You're passionate about it because you actually maybe got something done. You moved a needle that mattered, right? I mean, like, I always mention my cord service because I love my cord peeps. I love the people who are program directors who really want to make the world a better place for all trainees and educators and all the rest of it. Like, man, like amazing people doing amazing things. And I'm really proud of the fact that I got to do amazing things with amazing people. And I think that's a lot of times how I talk about those things. So, you know, you're proud of the things you did often because you're proud of the teamwork that happened or the needle that got moved. And why are you proud of that? Because not only did your team do something, but also you actually served people, right? I mean, we're service people. Like maybe you managed to help get a program started or get people vaccinated or get people services. All of those things really matter, and that's big in emergency medicine. So I don't see it as bragging. I mean, you're telling people your story. That's one way to tell your story. So just don't, again, I do struggle with this. I think maybe more traditionally as a female and, sort of, but I also want to say that like, it's important to really talk about yourself and take credit where credit's due, because so many of you have done such amazing things. And that's who we want to get to know, is the person who wants to do great things for great people. I mean, our patients matter, our communities matter. And if you've done something for a community, talk about it. Man, we love to hear it.
This is the whole point of the interview, right? If I wasn't going to let you brag about anything, then I would just read your application. I want to see enthusiasm, and I want to see what you're excited about and passionate about. So that's why we're doing this.
Something that I did, because I couldn't agree more with both these guys. I mean, absolutely, this is the time where I want this, and I as an interviewer, I want to hear this. I want to know. But something that I did, because I struggled a little bit when I was going through residency applications, is I very much practiced with my personal cheerleaders. So my friends that I knew that were going to be like, "Yeah, you are awesome. Say it again." And then I was like, "Oh, okay. I guess I'm kind of okay with talking about this," because my friends are like, "No, you should say more things." And it was so that was actually really helpful, because I was like, "Oh, this is actually a normal way to communicate some of the things that I'm extraordinarily proud about." And it doesn't, as hard as we are on ourselves, and as much as we think that we're bragging and being grandiose, it's probably not as bad as you think it is, in a sense of like, you're probably being very appropriate and fully explaining something that's totally cool that you did. But we have this in our head of like, well, maybe I'm just going a little bit too much. So practice with your friends that know are not going to try to reel you in. And that was really helpful for me.
Got it. Find your personal cheerleaders, everyone.
Yeah.
So next question, should you be explaining anything on your application without you being prompted to, especially, in regards to red flags, anything you'd like to explain, but, you don't have an opportunity to do so?
I would strongly encourage, I think it really, if there's a red flag in your application, almost always the programs should be the ones mentioning it. If it's something that they care about,
I
you
agree.
know.
If there was a disqualifying red flag in your application, you wouldn't have been invited to interview there. We are pretty good about going through ERAS and we usually don't miss things. And so if there's something that the program finds, usually the program director will be the one to bring it up. You don't have to initiate that.
Now, if it's a really good example of growth for yourself, that could help you sort of like speak your narrative though, right? So if the question is, hey, can you tell me about something that maybe you failed at or something you struggled with and you had some challenges with like a clerkship score or a step score or something else that came up, you can say, hey, you know what? This was something that was on my application, but I wanted to bring it up because it was a time that I really learned a lot and I gained a lot and I bettered myself and improved and really worked on trying to enhance myself as I learned and grew as a person in a potential position. That's a way that you can kind of like address it and still talk about it. But always making sure that you're talking about how you grew and how you learned, how you triumphed over the challenge that you faced.
Thank you. And another question, how do you answer an unexpected question, or if you get stumped, how do you think students should go about it?
Panic. That's going to be the first thing you're going to want to make sure to just fully melt down. No, actually, I think just being upfront and asking for a pause is the best way to approach it. Hey, wow, Dr. Millen, that's a really great question. Do you mind if I just take a beat to just sort of sit and then think about that to make sure I can give you a really good answer? Not only does saying that sort of like elevate the answer to the question because I know that you're actually taking it, but I also know that you're not just trying to stumble through something to try to wind your way to maybe some sort of semblance of an answer to the question that I asked.
I totally agree. Take a beat and compose yourself for a second. Also, I don't know if you guys have ever had this problem, but like every once in a while I've been asked a question, but it's really a 3-part question. And so sometimes you just have to sort of divide it up and be like, I really heard 3 questions in there. Hold on for a second. Dr. Comp, I'm just going to take that beat and maybe I'm going to work on this first question that you asked me. And then I'm going to maybe work on that second question you asked me. And then we'll get to that third question you asked me. Because sometimes, you know, depending on who's interviewing you, sometimes they ask you a really, really like big question. And it's kind of like, that's not just a single question or, ooh, yeah, take that beat.
That's a great tip.
I think a little bit of deflection is okay, as long as you're still providing a thoughtful answer. For me, my experiential memory is not great. I'm great with facts and numbers. I'm not painting the best picture of myself as we go through this. I need concrete examples and I need facts and numbers. I'd be a terrible interviewer. But when people ask about a time that this happened, or give me a time when you disagreed with a resident about management of the patient. I'm terrible at remembering times that so-and-so happened, but I can say something, I can deflect a little bit. So I can say, you know, I've gotten great feedback from multiple evaluators and through my EM rotations on my interpersonal communication. And I don't remember a specific time when I disagreed with a resident about management, but if that happened, I would handle it in this way. And a little bit of a deflection, but a thoughtful answer to the question is perfectly fine with me.
And you can also bring up, like, I don't remember that happening in the course of a residency, but I had an experience when I was working as a server, right? Like I had that, you know, I mean, I had that experience in another aspect of my life. And here's kind of the situation that occurred. And I really thought, you know, it's so you've actually, I mean, that's the other thing too, is you don't always have to talk about the medical sphere. It can be outside the medical sphere. Maybe you were on a sports team and there was a conflict. Maybe you were a server, like I waitressed, you know, like conflict always came up as being a server. You know, it's very, very applicable. And so how do you manage that conflict? I think there's lots and lots of places where you can just understand that like anywhere you've had that experience in any way, shape, or form is going to be applicable.
Thank you so much, everyone. I really think that's important because a lot of students, I know personally, I always tend to answer like clinically. So it's important to realize we have multiple experiences in multiple parts of our life. So that definitely helps. Thank you.
Those are some of my favorite questions, like answers to questions. You know, when someone was like, can I answer that question? Not like sort of out of the sphere of medicine. And I'm like, oh yeah, this is going to be awesome. Like that is absolutely a favorite. Definitely keep those stories in mind as well.
Okay, and another question, how do you address questions about interest in programs out of the area you're from? So, you know, you're on the other coast, but they really like your program. How can they go about it?
Well, that was one of the values of signaling this year, for one thing. But I think the other part of it is like, why are you interested, right? I mean, you may have a mission. I mean, look at me. You know, I trained in New York and here I am in Seattle. I'm on the a completely opposite coast. There's a whole lot of in there of like why you're interested, right? You're interested because your mission speaks to me. You're this, you know, this is, you know, like I have family here and this would be a really great fit. Or I really always thought that this would be a really fantastic place to practice. And I know that training here would be a great opportunity for me to understand more, you know, to basically get my foot in the door to live here forever kind of thing. All those kinds of things. I would also be cautious though, like, right, like, you know, if I really want to know why you're interested in my program, I don't want to really hear so much about why you want to ski all day, every day. Like, you know, you may like skiing and that's fantastic. I don't have anything against skiers. I'm using skiers because I don't ski. But you know, it's sort of like, talk to me about my program, about my mission. I mean, we put a lot of time out like into sort of talking about our hospital missions and what we want to do and things like that. So if there's a real hook in our mission for you, great. If there is a real hook for you because you've got family there, great. We want you to thrive. I really want to just say this over and over and over again. Program directors want you to be happy. We want you to be happy. We want you to thrive, and we want to know what that makes you do and thrive. Right now, if skiing is part of that, that's fine. Like I also like happen to know here because I've spent a lot of time in this area because I also happen on my off time to ski, but I also know a lot about your program. Fit that in, okay? But understand that it should be balanced. That's all. Yeah. Why would you be happy here?
Where your research matters, and you should go into every interview knowing some reason why you would fit well with the program or why you would want to be at that program. And we realize how much geography matters. That's not something that's hidden. We're completely aware of how much geography matters to people in making their rank list and in applying to programs, in selecting where they're going to interview. But we want to know what you know or why you like our program as well. Some of my best residents over the past few years are, you know, from nowhere near Oklahoma, and when we have these post-interview meetings, someone will say, I don't think this person's going to come to Oklahoma, and we have to shut that down really quickly and say,
yes,
there are no geographic limitations and anyone can go anywhere.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we're really hitting the nail on the head, right? I mean, the way that you tell us that you're interested is by telling us that you're interested, right? And by knowing why you want to come. We rarely, I mean, I would say almost all programs are rarely going to exclude someone from interviewing or exclude someone from ranking because they're not in the same geographic area, because we know that not every medical school is a feeder for every single residency, right? I mean, we want to have people that come from everywhere, because that's how we develop a really diverse, incredible family within our programs. So letting us know through, just like Dr. Gallagher said, through research, just like Dr. Millman said, through our website. I mean, that's how you let us know.
So I just wanted to kind of like check in with like, Bonnie brought this great question up of like, if you're interested in like, you know, county programs, what's the best way to identify specific unique things about programs? Well, like a lot of county programs, like just knowing that you're interested in county programs alone already has basically like, that's part of what you're looking for, right? You're looking for a service mission. That's a service mission right there. So I think like you've already kind of coned down, like, you know, now look at the website, there may be other specific things, right? Like we have a section of population health, but we're also the county hospital for King County. But like, yeah, I mean, not everybody, like the fact that you're a county program is a mission. And that is already saying, this is what matters to me. This is what matters to me. This is what matters to me. And so you can say that I'm looking predominantly at county programs because those are the ones that are most speak to me because of the service mission. That's fine.
Additionally, many programs, if many programs have that in the EMRA match website. If you guys haven't gone on there to check that out, primary training site, it lists if it's more of like a an academic, a county, community, or some of the variations sort of like within that spectrum. And that can also help you out narrowing down what kind of places you're looking for.
Thank you. So next are some questions about the interview itself. So what are your top questions that you ask in all residency application or applicants during interviews? And then we talked a little bit about diversity or adversity and challenges that you've gone through in conflicts. Any other big topics that you know will come up as questions?
If I gave you my favorite questions, then I'm not going to be able to know what your answers are during my actual interview. I think some of the things to sort of think about are what are some of the ones that are kind of like that we've been dancing around. Like, what are some of your strengths? What are some of your weaknesses? Why do you want to come to this program? Why do you want to be an emergency medicine physician? Those kinds of themes, if you have just some general thoughts on those kinds of questions, you will likely get asked in some way or another about those questions throughout your entire interview process.
I was just looking at this one question though, as far as like, what about like the background that you use? What about like the like, what do you need to succeed? And I was just saying that like, sorry, like, so just kind of answering this question of like, because it's not just the questions that you're going to be asked, but also like, right, people are always worried about their backgrounds and whether, and I will say that like, try to connect with an Ethernet cable if you can, as much as possible, so you're less reliant on Wi-Fi, which can kind of glitch. I think the most important thing is that good connection, because like Dr. Kopp was saying, like I can ask you these questions, right? But if I can't hear the answers, then that's the problem. I don't think it matters what your background is. I don't think it matters. Like, I don't think it as long as it doesn't look weird, goopy, you know, when you like, because you can go on Zoom and you can look and be like, does this look too weird? Can you see my face? Like, just basic things. But the most important thing is your connection, because otherwise, if we don't hear the questions answered and we're sort of anxious about that, that's a problem.
I had a med student last year have their green screen match their shirt. So they were kind of a bit of a floating head for some of it. And that was really distressing for me. And I told him, I was like, hey, I need to help you with this. And it ended up being fine. But you can also just practice with your tech. I think that's a big one, is practice with the tech, be comfortable with your setup, have like a quiet space. So like I have a dog and 2 twin boys, and they're safely locked out of the house or locked out of the room for right now. So
I like that they're locked out of the house.
I know I caught myself just not fast enough. They're out in the street somewhere. But having like a space where you can really try not to have the distractions, because that's how you can kind of get derailed in some of your answers. If you're having to do manage something else on your end of the video screen.
Agreed. So one of the questions of like, what would be good questions to ask the residents, right? Like, I think a lot of those questions in the world of Zoom are really matter. So like, sometimes you're going to have a social or a happy hour, if you can jump in on any of those, like that's fantastic. Because I do think often you'll get a sense of the resident flavor, but I think that the questions are going to be unique to you. So like, right, I mean, if you're a single person and you say, hey, what do singles do around here? And people are like, well, most of us are married. That's going to be like, that's going to be something like, well, maybe this isn't going to be the best social fit for me. I would also say like, one of the questions that I remember asking residents was, can you tell me a time like when your PD advocated for you or for a colleague? Like, what did that look like?
I like that one a lot.
Like, what did that look like? Because like, I mean, that's what you really want, is somebody who's going to sort of like advocate for you.
yeah, how responsive is residency leadership to issues, either interpersonal with other departments, with yourself? If I'm having a hard time, how have you felt supported by residency leadership or by co-residents, right?
I was going to share a couple of questions that my chair asks all applicants, because I think it shows some of the range of questions and some questions that you may not anticipate. But one of the ones he always asks, which I think is a fantastic question, is at graduation, we talk a little bit about every resident. What do you want us to say about you when you graduate from our program? And it gives you the opportunity to kind of reflect on what your accomplishments can be in 3 years, as well as who you are. And then his other question is, if you could have any superpower, what would it be? And you're going to get questions like that along the interview trail. If you were a kitchen utensil, what utensil would you be? These are not validated questions, and interview psychologists would frown very heavily at these questions, but those are some of the questions that you'll receive on the trail as well.
I just had to laugh because I was about to add that I got like, what kind of tree would you be? And I was like, I am a New York City kid. I really like, I'm a little bit lost on like this whole tree thing, but
now you have beautiful trees as your background. It's fantastic.
now I would say cherry tree. I would be a cherry
go.
tree because like it is exuberant in April and May. Yes, I would. I love this background. It makes me really happy.
Dr. Milman brought up a really great point Dr. Milman brought up another really great point of other questions that you may be asked. Just more about you as a human, as a person. What kind of things do you like doing? You know, if you were to design a perfect day, you had a whole day to yourself, what would that look like? Or what was your favorite book or favorite movie? And being comfortable in sharing that, because we also want to get to know you, right? I mean, we want to see, one, if you know, you sort of understand kind of what you're getting into by coming to a residency, but also you know, who you are. And do you think that we think that you'd be a match for us, just as we hope that we'd be a match for you?
So what are some red flags when you interview anybody? I think I'm going to just translate this question that we got, because I would say, what are red flags when you interview anybody? I would say being annoyed when I ask a question. Like, I do know that sometimes you guys are tired. Trust me, I know. Trust me, I know. But I think, you know, that's probably the first thing is like, if somebody's sort of annoyed by me asking something on their application, you know, whether it's a red flag or not a red flag, or it's like whatever, I'm kind of like, hey, I just asked you a question because I want to learn about you. Like, please don't be annoyed that I've asked the same question that so-and-so asked. I mean, sometimes people are like, I just answered that question. I'm like, oh, okay, right. Like, we can change the question if you want, right? Like, that's okay. If you know, but I think there's ways to phrase it. And so like, I would just say like, please try to stay positive. We don't know. Most of us don't know what our co-interviewers asked. And so if you really are like, I've just really answered the same same question 3 times, like, would it be okay for us to talk about something else only because I've just talked about it 3 times? Would be fine. Like, I'm fine with that. I talked to the interview team afterwards. So fine. We can absolutely talk about something else.
I think any negativity is a red flag, whether it's bad mouthing another program or another specialty. If you tell me you went into EM because you can't stand surgeons because they're not up to date with the literature and they're completely abrasive personalities, then while I may agree with you in the back of my head, it's not something that should come out during an interview. And that applies broadly.
I had somebody who was couples matching and they badmouthed their partner. I know. I was like, I'm so confused right now. So confused. Yes.
Woof.
Yeah, that surprised me. I have to say, I'm still stunned by it years later. I'm like, I don't understand.
This kind of goes without being said, but it does need to be reminded every once in a while, especially in the time of Zoom punctuality. We recognize that things happen, but you know, if you have RSVP'd to be at the resident event the night before, be there on time. You know, if there's a start time for the interview the next morning, be there on time. Check your connections, check your technology, log on early to try to mitigate any kind of like like internet bombs, and we all recognize that that happens. But you know, while you are like sometimes with this sort of era of Zoom, like times can sometimes get a little bit goofy, and that's okay too. But know your time zone, very, very important, and be punctual.
Could not agree more. 100%.
In case anyone missed the chat, Dr. Gallagher just said 10 minutes early at least for interviews. I think it's important.
Yes.
Just like you would a shift. It gives you enough
Yes.
time to like log in your computer. Like, you know, you want to be logged in and ready to go. And like, just like I come 10 minutes early to all my shifts to make sure that I'm logged in, ready to go, see what like the trackboard looks like, take down some names. I'm there in case something bad happens. Like, it's just give yourself enough breath to do that. Yeah. Because it does look
Invariably.
bad rolling in. Like you can't say it's traffic if it's like
No.
virtual.
Yeah, the dog did not eat your homework. Because like invariably there's going to be a Zoom update. Your computer will auto update, and this will be the first time you open up your computer for the day, and you're like, oh no. So always have a backup too, right? So I have my phone right next to me, and if things like go south, then I can log on and then just explain it. Hey, you know, things may be a little bit fuzzy. My computer was being a little bit weird, so I actually have to do this on my phone, but I'm still here. I'm really excited to meet you, and I can't wait for the interview. So you can almost even own it as a bit of a positive of like, hey, you know what? I had a feeling that something might be going a little bit wonky, so I have this backup. So if you can bear with me, just keep that in mind, kind of thing.
There's one other red flag I would say is like, you know, a lot of times there's opportunity to sort of talk with the residents, or like there may be a little downtime where maybe you have a resident in a room or whatever. And I would try to be engaging with that person and anybody else in that chat room as you're waiting for the next interview. I do think that that's a little bit of a red flag when people just sort of like, if you're being put in a chat room with a resident to just sort of ask questions or to just to banter, like, be present, ask them questions, just be real. It is a really valuable opportunity. We know you're nervous, and so sometimes, like, depending on if you're an introvert or an extrovert, like that may or may not be so comfortable. But it helps for people to get to know you in that sort of chat room, and you know, you do have a unique opportunity if that's you know, that happens. I've had a couple candidates where they're like in with the chief and they shut down their camera, and it's like, you know, it's fine if you say I have to go to the bathroom, but like it's weird when you just shut down your camera and we don't know where you are or something like that. So I think, you know, it's fine if like, you know, somebody like your mom's just called and you're worried about them, or, you know, I don't know, like there's lots of, you know, but I would just say like if you're not taking advantage of like all of the opportunities for interfacing, at least explain why. Or like if you have to go to the bathroom, that's fine. Like if you have to like go take a quick phone call, that's fine too. You know, all the things are fine, but it like just to shut it down during an interview is sort of one of these things where it's like, okay, are you tired? Are you bored? Or I don't know. Like tell us more. Just tell us more.
And
It's all
actually
the time during in-person interviews where someone was rude to someone at the information desk or cut someone off on the way into the parking lot or had something go on in the airport and it always got back to the program director, and there are all kinds of stories. And so all of those have kind of gone away in going to virtual, but the baseline is be professional the entire time, all through interview season, after interview season, always be professional.
I was just laughing because, you know, it's sort of like the other thing too is if you happen to call the program manager, that is the person who matters more than anybody in the world. I don't know, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, every PD, basically their program manager, they live and die by their program manager. And so like, please, when we talk about being professional, treat my program manager well, be nice, thank them, like, just do it. Cause like they're taking a lot, like, you know, recruitment season is harder on them than anybody. And so like the more we're just all collegial, the more it matters. But I would say every once in a while we have people who are really rude to the program manager and we're all like, why would you do that? Why would you do that? This is the person who like makes my job doable.
And a lot of times they have a say when it comes to ranking applicants or at least providing information about applicants.
Absolutely. And I think that really hits on even what Bonnie put in the chat, how much inputs to residents, how much your application cycle through social, the formal interview process. We have residents, we have chiefs that are in the formal interview, and then we also have the social. Like Dr. Gallagher was saying, if, there's an interesting, I'll say it, interaction, it's going to come up. Assume that every single person that you meet on interview day has a decision about whether or not you will be at that program next year.
So we're starting to close up a little bit. Just two more questions I'd like to get through if we have a sec. Especially when it comes to communications outside of your immediate interview, what is your take on post-interview communications? Do you like emails? Do you not like emails? What should students be looking to?
That's a really good question, and I fall on all sides of this depending on the day. Emails and thank you gifts. Please don't send me any gifts. It's like illegal. We're not allowed to get any gifts. No gifts. I think sometimes it's nice to have the courtesy. I think sometimes, but I also sort of feel like, oh, gifts. I will
Yes.
go with a gift. I like
I'll take gifts. Yeah, I'm into that.
I think it's a challenge, It's like I think whenever I have interviewed for anything, I've ended up still sending a thank you note. And I think it just helps for me to just feel gratitude, and it's a nice way for me to sort of reflect back on that. But I don't know that there should be a strong obligation, and especially if you really didn't like a program. I don't know. Right? Like I think every once in a while, like if you love a program and you had a great experience at whatever experience you had with them, I think there's nothing wrong with thanking people. I think it's just it's still courteous. And to be honest, I think it benefits me more than anybody else when I write thank you notes, because I'm like, wow, I really, really enjoyed getting to know this person or this program or whatever, and this is why. And that's kind of nice to hear. But I don't know that, like, I would never change my ranking based on anybody's thank you note. So I wouldn't say it's like a requirement as much as it's a nice courtesy. And I don't know. It's kind of like, it's a nice thing to do, but I wouldn't say that most programs are not going to count you up or count you down. And I do know some programs where the program director is like, don't send me anything. I don't want to send anything. And I will say that, like, I struggle with how to respond to a thank you note, because we're not supposed to have any post-match communication or post-interview communication other than questions. And so, like, I struggle with how, like, do I respond? Do I not respond? What's the right professional thing to do? And so, like, in past years, I've sort of said, I'm not going to respond to anything unless you have a question, because I want to be really, really on the right side of the NRMP. But I don't know. I think it's really up to you and what feels genuine.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you like to like genuinely convey thanks, or say, hey, I had a really great time, I think that's awesome. But if you're feeling like you have to do it to check the box, it's not going to be the reason that you don't end up high on their rank list.
Thank you. And as we're coming to close, last question, because I think everyone's, since everyone submitted ERAS, we're all pretty addicted to our email inboxes and checking everything every 2 seconds. And I just like a clarification on, there was a statement with October 19th and there being some interviews being released around that time. Is there any specific like consensus on, like, is it going to be rolling or pretty much adhere to that date? If you can speak to that a little bit.
So that October 19th is a sort of like a county program agreement sort of thing, and some places opt in and some places topped out. The problem with recruitment is it's as individual for our programs as it is for you, right? I mean, the way, like, the way you're gonna invite people or take up invitations and drop invitations, it's so dependent on sort of the whole season and where things are and where things are at and how you do things. So each program does things just a little bit differently. I would say that's probably a good kind of like thumbnail of, like, if I really, really loved a program and I really want to know if I'm going to get an invitation or not invitation, and I haven't heard after the 20th, that might be the right time to sort of just say, hey, I'm really interested in your program for these reasons. I haven't heard back yet. I just want to kind of find out where you're at, because programs sometimes get really, really swamped and it's really hard to stay on top of everything. But also, if you reach out to a program and you say you haven't heard yet, if you do get offered an interview, be willing and able to take an interview. There's nothing worse than having somebody reach out in early October and be like, I'm really interested in your program for all these really reasons. And you're looking and you're like, yeah, they'd be a great fit. And then they're like, okay, you know, and then they like,
I can't
decline
take that
you.
day, right? Yeah.
You know, it's all. So, you know, just know that that's sort of like you are now a person of attention if you get an interview offer from them. And so like, just know that you're kind of obligating yourself too. and recognize that is, we are bidirectional, feedback's bidirectional, invitations are bidirectional. We are getting our messages from you. And so do recognize that that's something that you're sending out a message one way or other. So don't just like flat out do it like to every program. You want to do it very selectively to places that you're like, you are my number one program because of X, Y, or Z, or you are my, you know, I really am interested in your program. This captured me. And that you know that you're going to be willing to take some hard choices and take that interview as much as possible.
And you're going to get a huge range of how programs release dates. So you'll get some batch releases and some rolling releases, or some that do first round, second round, third round. Just roll with it. That's what EM's about. We all recognize that this is the highest stress time of the year and of medical school and of your lives. But and we don't want that to be the case. We want to do everything possible to mitigate that, but that's difficult to do on our side also. So you're going to see every version of interview releases and different dates that interviews are released. One thing I'll say about email is programs use all different kinds of softwares for interview scheduling. We're going to see more come through ERAS this year, because with program signals, one of the ways we're researching program signals is by releasing interviews through ERAS. But some programs use Interview Broker, some programs use Thalamus. There are all kinds of other software out there. Some programs will have you call the program coordinator. So just check your spam filters periodically through this month and make sure that you're not missing anything.
Yes.
I will
Great
also say
tip.
we've been a huge push on trying people not offering more interviews. Like that, a best practice is not to offer more interviews than you have spaces. And so I will say that, you know, there is no such thing as like all the interviews get released on a single day. It's really very much of like every program's going to have a little bit of flex, and there's no single day that, you know, even though the 19th is this great rule of thumb for a good number, like programs who are sort of trying to create some set of expectations, just know that there's going to be a lot of shifting and adjusting, because programs have been told multiple times that it's not a good practice to invite more people than you can accommodate. And so that does mean that there's going to be some level of rolling process with all of this. So you guys are awesome. It's going to be a great year. I just want to say that. And I know that it's always anxious and it's scary, and it's right. I mean, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, just remember, you're going into one of like what we think is the best specialty because we're in it and we train people like you. You've chosen well. And it's going to be a great season. I just want to reassure you guys of like how many great programs there are, how proud we are that you guys have chosen our specialty of all the wonderful specialties out there. And so like, we're here for you if you have questions or concerns.
Yes, please reach out. I just put my email in the chat box. You know, we are all products of going through this process too, right? And we had mentors that helped us. And I'm sure all of us would be happy to help you guys out and answer questions, either for our own specific program or just about the match in general. This is super, super stressful. This is a really challenging time. Congratulations. We're looking forward to meet you.
All right, so that concludes our EMRA Hangouts today. I want to thank Drs. Comp, Dr. Gallahue, and Dr. Millman today for your time and for your suggestions. We're all going to put it into practice, and our EM interviews are going to be great. So thank you for all the students coming here, and I wish you the best of luck during this season. So thank you.